Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly extraordinary narrative. It's the story of a man who was locked away for 27 years in prison, suffering unimaginable loss, but who never, ever gave up hope. We're going to explore how he didn't just survive his imprisonment, but actually emerged to fundamentally change South Africa and, honestly, inspire the entire world. But before we get into the historical timeline, I want to pose a very direct, very powerful question to you. Would you choose revenge or forgiveness? Seriously, think about it. If a system unjustly took away decades of your life, stripped your rights, and harassed your family, what would your reaction be? Keep that heavy question in the back of your mind because it really frames the ultimate, almost unimaginable choice our subject eventually had to make. All right, let's start right at the beginning with Section 1, the making of a troublemaker. Born in 1918 in Vabso as Rolihlala, which literally translates to troublemaker, by the way. He grew up in a royal household, and it was there that he learned early on that a true leader listens and serves the people. Okay, let's dive into the slide. When Mandela moved to the massive, bustling city of Johannesburg, he confronted the brutal reality of his country head-on. The system was called apartheid, which means apartness in Afrikaans. Now, this wasn't just some social custom. It was a rigid system of laws, separating people by race, placing literally all societal and political power in the hands of white people, while systematically stripping away the rights of Black, colored, and Indian people. Mandela saw a world where the majority of the population couldn't vote, couldn't freely travel, and had their dignity crushed on a daily basis. That brings us to Section 2, the fight against apartheid, starting with his early activism in 1944 when a 26-year-old Mandela joined the African National Congress. When Mandela first joined, the early ANC relied on a pretty gentle approach, writing letters, drafting petitions, politely asking the government for change. But for Mandela and his peers, who were watching their communities suffer under increasingly harsh laws, well, polite letters simply weren't enough. So they formed the ANC Youth League and shifted entirely toward an action-oriented approach. We're talking organizing strikes, direct protests, and campaigns designed to put real, tangible pressure on the government. Let's move to and see how this builds over the decade. In 1952, they launched the Defiance Campaign, this massive wave of nonviolent resistance where people deliberately broke apartheid laws. Then in 1955, they write the Freedom Charter. But 1960 is a tragic turning point. In Sharpeville, police opened fire on peaceful protesters, killing 69 people. That massacre shocked the world and forced the ANC to rethink everything. Believing peaceful protests were no longer possible, this timeline culminates in 1961 with the formation of an armed wing called Umkhonto we Sizwe. Now, this shift to armed struggle was not taken lightly. Mandela famously stated, "We chose to start a fight against violence, to use controlled violence against the government's violence." He knew exactly how dangerous it was to go underground. He knew he could be killed. But after years of peaceful protests just being met with bullets, he felt he had absolutely no other choice but to answer the government's harsh force with targeted sabotage. This escalation ultimately led to a police raid, and Mandela was charged with sabotage. Facing the death penalty during the highly tense, famous Rivonia trial, Mandela stood up in court and gave a massive 4-hour speech. He ended it with a powerful declaration: "It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." It was just an incredible showcase of his unwavering dedication to a free society. Moving on, this brings us to Section 3, 27 years in prison. The world watched in shock as he avoided the death penalty, but was instead sentenced to life imprisonment on the harsh Robben Island. 27. I really want that number to sink in for a second. 27 years behind bars. That is almost half of his adult life, locked away in a cell, removed from the world while his country continued to burn. The sheer, agonizing weight of that lost time is honestly hard to even comprehend. And the isolation was intentionally extreme. We're talking just one single letter every 6 months, and it was strictly capped at 500 words. Oh, and just one visitor every 6 months. And when that one visitor finally came, he was granted a total of 30 minutes with them. Just try to imagine that, having only 30 minutes with your family twice a year. During these decades, his wife was being constantly harassed by the government on the outside. His mother passed away, his eldest son died in a car crash, and he was forbidden from attending either of their funerals. The enormous personal pain he endured was just staggering. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how he responded. The authorities tried to break his spirit through hard labor at a blindingly bright limestone quarry, which actually caused permanent eye damage. But he refused to let his spirit break. Instead, he and the other inmates transformed the facility into Mandela University through shared learning. He even deliberately learned Afrikaans so he could understand the language of his oppressors, eventually earning the genuine respect of his guards. And amazingly, when the government offered him early freedom on the condition that he renounce his cause, he flat out refused. That unyielding strength brings us to Section 4, the choice of forgiveness. You see, as international sanctions completely choked the dying apartheid economy, the government was finally forced to negotiate. Let's look at this incredible timeline. In 1989, secret meetings began with South African President F.W. de Klerk. Then, in 1990, the moment the world had been waiting for, Nelson Mandela finally walks free at the age of 71. By 1993, he and de Klerk are jointly awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for their collaborative efforts. And in 1994, we see those historic, emotional lines of first-time voters casting their ballots. During this delicate transition, a lot of people expected the country to plunge right into a civil war. They expected Mandela to want revenge. But instead, he famously chose to reach out. As he said, if you want to make peace with your enemy, you have to work with your enemy. Then he becomes your partner. He literally drank tea with the widows of the very men who architected apartheid. He proved that reconciliation was the absolutely crucial and really the only viable path forward. Following those historic elections, Mandela became South Africa's first Black president. On May 10, 1994, during his inauguration speech, he drew a firm line under the past with this iconic promise. Never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another. And that brings us to our final section, Section 5, A Legacy of Hope. Because now, President Mandela faced a monumental challenge, healing a traumatized, deeply divided nation. And this brilliantly illustrates his solution. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It was a special court built on a specific 4-step process. First, victims of apartheid were given a platform to tell their stories. Second, perpetrators came forward to publicly confess their crimes. Third, if they told the full truth, they could receive amnesty. It was an incredibly painful process, as you can imagine, but step 4 was the ultimate goal. By prioritizing truth over traditional punishment, the nation was able to actively break the cycle of revenge and actually prevent further violence. His dedication remained crystal clear. He was beloved, right? He could have easily stayed in power, but he deliberately chose to step down after just one term to prove that a healthy democracy relies on strong institutions, not powerful individuals. Even after his presidency, his global activism didn't stop. He traveled the globe, speaking out against the HIV/AIDS epidemic, championing education, and raising funds for children. When he passed away in 2013 at the age of 95, he cemented himself as a universal symbol of strength and humanity. So the crucial point is this. One man, standing with his people against impossible odds, proved that, as he said, it always seems impossible until it's done. Instead of letting anger consume him, he used his freedom to prove that hope and forgiveness are infinitely more powerful than hate. So I want to leave you with a question. What impossible injustice can you help dismantle in your world today? Mandela's story reminds us that systems can change and human empathy can triumph, but it requires individuals who flat out refuse to accept things as they are. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep believing that change is possible.